Hello, everyone. Hello, Senator Jones.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm going to say outright it's a little crazy that we're speaking to a Democratic senator from Alabama.
Yeah. I've been telling folks, when I first got invited to a bunch of these gatherings like this, I thought it's just because I was so damn popular. But I realized that I am the closest thing to a unicorn that exists in the country. So I appreciate everybody, and I appreciate being here.
So your victory in Alabama pulled together a broad group of people, Black Americans in the Black Belt and elsewhere in the state, moderate Republicans, the handful of liberal Democrats and moderate Democrats in the state. How did you keep that coalition together? What kind of message bridged the very real gaps of geography and class and race that are in that? And once I answer that question, is that replicable for anyone else any Democrat in the Deep South? Can that be done again?
Well, I hope it can. When we first started looking at this race, and I didn't really look at it until kind of late in the game. Originally, this special election was supposed to be held in this November of this year in conjunction with our state elections. And then when our governor went out of office under all his, misdeeds with his girlfriend, the new governor moved the election up, and it was only then we really started looking at that. Now, having said that, having gone back to January of 17, having been in my law office with a new client on January 21st, the day after the inaugural, but on the day of the Women's March, and not being able to go into the streets downtown Birmingham because of this new client, because I did have to earn a living. My wife was down there. My granddaughters were down there. I saw thousands and thousands of people in Birmingham, Alabama. Women primarily, but also men, people of color, you name it. They were all 10,000 or more estimated in downtown Birmingham. So we knew and felt that there was an energy out there that had not been seen in Alabama for a long time, an energy for an alternative voice, a voice that just hadn't been out there in a long time, because I think Democrats had just conceded too many races. There were people that got on the ballot, but they were obviously not very qualified, had no experience, no money, and they were just, for whatever reason, they were just not going to go anywhere, and it was all but a concession. And in many cases, like the Sessions seat in 2014, it was conceded. He had no opposition in either party. And so we knew that there was a coalition to be built even before Roy Moore became the nominee. And that coalition, we believed, was built on people that believed that elections have consequences. They were seeing that. They believed that we needed to start talking about the issues that we have in common, the issues that people talk about every day. I called them the kitchen table issues: jobs, the economy, wages. Healthcare was a really important driver for us during that election. And that if we could do that and stay focused on those issues and not get sidetracked in the issues that we knew were coming, that were going to divide us, but take our stand on those issues, remain true to what I believe, because I really believe authenticity in a candidate is probably the biggest virtue that a candidate can have. And my wife and I, when we talked about it, so thank you for somebody out there. Thank you. Thank you. At least there's one authentic person out here. I don't know about anybody else. That we really believed that we could have a message that would get us across the finish line, regardless of who the nominee was. And if we didn't, we were still going to be fine, because we knew we were also, our objective, our goal was to always win this race, but our objective was to also build something in Alabama that hadn't been there for a long time. And I do think that people can replicate that, but it takes a lot of discipline. It takes being authentic and having a candidate who is not going to get caught up in the garbage that gets thrown at you and the noise of politics today and the issues that divide us. It takes, talking about the very specific issues that people across the country care about on a daily basis. Not that they don't care about other issues that do divide us, but the issues that they care about on a daily basis. And then engagement. We really had an engagement process planned, and we were able to get enough people engaged, and that engagement, I think, was also critical. So I think that can be replicated, but it takes, I think, an awful lot of discipline on the behalf of the candidate and the campaign. I told my consultants early on, I said, now look, these are the issues I want to talk about. This is what I want to do. I said, don't ever, if we get to a point close to this election and we're within a few points and you come in and tell me that if you could only cut a commercial with me walking out of a church with a gun, I'm going to fire your ass, okay? It is not going to happen. We're going to talk about issues. So
a lot of that engagement was around black voters in the state, all through the black belt. What specific messages did you find spoke to black voters in those areas of the state? And as far as your time in Washington, how have you begun to translate sort of the outreach you've made to black voters to policy and work here in Washington?
Well, obviously, we believed, and I believed at the time, that I had a very good track record with the African American community. As U.S. Attorney, I had worked a lot. I've been involved in political campaigns a long time, going back to the days of Senator Heflin, who was one of the first Alabama politicians that really, he really cultivated votes of all segments of Alabama, including the African American community. He was a senator who first appointed had nominated 2 African American federal judges in Alabama in 1979 and 1980. We didn't have any more until Barack Obama came into office in 2009, and that's because one of those African Americans that got the judgeship in 1980 retired, became a senior judge. So there was a spot, and they just didn't have a choice. But I saw what Judge Heflin did, and as U.S. Attorney, as many of you probably know, we did something that was very important to the African American community, but it was also important to the state, and that's what we reached back in time to prosecute the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church and convicted 2 old Klansmen. That gave me a platform because I was able to then, it was a lot easier to go to communities that if they didn't know my name, they at least knew what I had done. And they felt like that I was someone that they could count on, that I had done more than just talk the talk. And that was important. And I think that's important with any candidate, with any race, that if you can point to something that more than just the talk, it's easy to stand and give speeches. But if you can point to that, then you can say, this is what I've done, this is what I want to do, and it resonates more. And so we were able to, first of all, try to remind voters, about that case and who Doug Jones is. I don't say was, is. And that generated a lot of enthusiasm, I believe. And then we were able to start talking about health care and rural health care, which is a real problem in Alabama. We started talking about our HBCUs and the problems that they see. So that was messages that we continued to talk throughout the campaign. And as a senator, I've been able to try to do some things, I think, to follow through. We have a very diverse staff that I think reflects the state of Alabama in a really good way. It's a really great staff. And I want to make a point of making sure that we have a diverse staff. And the second thing we've done, we're focusing on rural health because we have hospitals closing throughout the state of Alabama. We have serious issues with healthcare delivery in the state into our rural areas. About 2/3 of our counties are all considered rural areas. And along with Senator Harris from California, we were able to corral enough of our senators that in the omnibus budget bill, we were able to get an additional 14% funding for HBCUs, which is the first funding increases that HBCUs have had in 5 to 6, 7 years, something like that. So it takes a little bit to do. Thank you. But we're working on it. I think one of the programs that we did that also affects a lot of the African American community and that I was very proud of, I campaigned a lot on the CHIP program, the Child Health Insurance Program. In fact, the night I won, I talked about that in my victory speech. It was, and people took notice on both sides of the aisle. So also as part of that, we were able to get CHIP funded for another 10 years, which is important to so many kids in those areas that went so heavily for me.
So one maybe criticism, I think, from some observers is that you have been pretty friendly towards President Trump's agenda, all things considered. You've supported Pompeo for Secretary of State compared to other Democrats. You have a much more willing to work with the Trump administration. How do you think that fares with this coalition you've assembled? Since some of those people were energized just by anti-Trump energy, and they may look at their new senator and say, hey, what's going on?
Well, let me put it a couple different ways, because I don't see it quite that way. The thing that I campaigned on and the thing that I'm doing as a senator was being an independent voice for Alabama. And I said consistently through the primary and through the election that if the president's agenda, if he puts forth things in his agenda that I believe is good for the people of my state and good for the country, I'm going to support that. I am not going to be a knee-jerk and just say, no, this is Donald Trump, and so I'm going to oppose it. If he puts things that are good, I will support that. If it's not good, and he has done that, his budget was not good for the people of Alabama. That's why Congress completely rejected it. His 2019 is not good for the people of Alabama or the country, and that's why it's dead on arrival. And they're already in the House and Senate working on that. Other than that, the only real agenda that's come before the Congress or before the Senate, other than nominations, and let me just say this about nominations. I don't really see, this is just a personal thing, having come up with Judge Heflin, who was a former Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. You know, Judge Heflin's view, he was a real constitutional guy, and his view was that the president deserves to have his or her nominees in place because they were elected and they deserve their team. But having said that, he also believed in the Senate's constitutional role for advise and consent. In other words, I'm not going to rubber stamp you, no matter who you are, and I'm not going to be a rubber stamp for the opposition, no matter who that might be. And I take that view. So what I do is I look at every nominee, and I try to candidly, with all candor, the needle is always in favor of the president, ever so, if even ever so slightly. I will say that a lot of times the needle that when I first started the Senate has probably moved a little bit closer to even, just to give him some break. But I'm going to do an independent review. I don't see that as an agenda, right, because I'm not going to nominate. I would not nominate probably anybody that is in place that this president has nominated. There might be a couple of exceptions. And so I can either just oppose them all, or then I can do an independent review and see, well, I'm not going to agree with these people all the time, but that's just not my role. Are they qualified? Do they have some kind of crazy agenda out there? Are they going to legislate from the bench, or are they qualified? And I'm going to do an independent view. I did that with Pompeo, and I ultimately decided that I thought that we should confirm him, and I did so for a couple of reasons. Number one, I sat down with him just like we're sitting down now, because I had some serious concerns. I had serious concerns about his political statements involving Muslims and involving the gay community, which in fact was personally offensive to me and my family. And that was really troubling. We talked about those. We talked about diplomacy versus military action. And I felt satisfied that he was being straight with me, and I felt comfortable. And I also thought this, and this gets lost a little bit. I also thought about the alternative. The State Department had been totally non-functional. Tillerson was a disaster. The president criticized the State Department. We were losing diplomacy around the world because of it. And the alternative was to have another several months. One, we didn't know who would come behind him. And two, in the interim, President Trump and John Bolton would be running foreign policy, and they do not answer to Congress at all. And so when you weigh all of those factors, that's why I did that. I think we're looking at a whole different set. But the fact of the matter is, I'm looking at everything that I do and what's best for, I think, the people of the state.
Right.
And sometimes I'm going to support him, and sometimes I'm not.
Have you made a decision on the CIA director nominee, Gina Haspel?
I have. I'm not sure right now. It has not been announced. I'm not sure right now is the appropriate forum to make an announcement. But you'll probably hear it before the end of the conference.
All righty. To turn back to Alabama, there's the new lynching memorial in Montgomery.
Yes.
It's gotten a lot of press. It's a very impressive piece of architecture, public memory. I would just love to hear your thoughts about the memorial, what it's trying to commemorate, and whether you think the fact that it even exists represents sort of a change, a progress for the state of Alabama. I can't imagine it being there 10 years ago.
Oh, no, I couldn't imagine it being there 10 years ago. I think it is another step in progress for the state and for the South. It is amazing. It's the only way. It will take your breath away. I would encourage everybody in this room, if you haven't been there, and some of you probably were, to come down and then go to Birmingham too. Go to Birmingham, see 16th Street and the Civil Rights Institute and Kelly Ingram Park and Bethel Baptist, where Fred Shuttlesworth preached. The lynching memorial was a much needed acknowledgement of a dark part of our history. And when people see the stories, it's one thing to just look and walk through the memorial and see the hanging fixtures. It's another when you actually read through and read how and why people were lynched. Women who were lynched simply because they complained about their husband being lynched, and for just no reasons. You see what we have come through, and I think if we could get more people there, it would give a greater sense of where we have been with race relations. I think what Brian Stevenson, who by the way I call Saint Brian for those that don't know him, he has done a remarkable thing to bring our attention to a part of our past that is often overlooked, because we talk about the civil rights movement and we talk about Emmett Till and the 4 girls killed, but we don't talk about the thousands who never made it to that point. And I think it really set the stage for where we are, and it's a remarkable achievement. I am so happy that we have it in the state of Alabama, and it is part of that civil rights trail that connects, to Birmingham. The Rosa Parks Museum is not far away.
Right. What do you think visitors to that memorial should take away for the present? There's a lot of racial divisiveness today. Hate crime rates are going up. So do you see any connection between what the EGI and Brian have tried to commemorate and things that are happening today in the United States?
I think that they will take away that there is, one, you still don't understand. You cannot, in this modern day, fathom why someone would be hanged like that in a public square. And if they think long enough about it, they will understand that a lot of that hatred, that prejudice at the time has still sifted through and forms the basis of our criminal justice system in a different way. And I think people can look at that and be a lot more tolerant of who we are and a lot more respectful of others. It's a really moving experience, and everyone, I think people that come there are coming there with a purpose to begin with. They're not just happening upon a memorial and saying, oh, we're on our way to the beach and we see this, why don't we stop? They're coming there with a purpose anyway, and they're coming there either because there are folks like here in the audience that have a passion about it, or they got something nagging about them. There's something inside that are saying, I need to see this and I need to understand. And so in that context, it's going to be like that proverbial pebble in the pond that can the ripples go everywhere.
We are out of time. Thank you, Senator
Already?
Jones. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I wish we could stay longer. Thank you all.